Making your own startup file is very simple in Blender. For example, you could delete the default cube, you could open another window, select the shader editor, or you could even change the render settings if you want. And then just go to File, Defaults and Save Startup File. For example, you have two objects, then select both, press Alt, click on a number and type whatever you want, and it will affect both. This goes also for modifiers. For example, here I press Alt again and type 2. Both objects have a modifier applied, the same modifier, and yes, it will apply it on both. For low numbers, you can just skip the 0. For example, instead of typing 0.1, you can just type 0.1. If you have selected an object, just press Shift and V to duplicate it. Now you can move it somewhere else, or you can press the right mouse button and it's in the same position as the first one. After duplicating the object, you can press Shift and R to repeat the action. If you need the same object many times in your scene, then you can make instances or links from the main object instead of just duplicating it, so you can reduce the file size and the amount of needed RAM. The first way is to make a linked object. For that, you just have to select it, then right click on the collection and say duplicate linked. And yeah, here's the extra object, but be aware it shares the same data. So if you change a vertex, for example, it also affects on the linked object. Another way is to make an instance, and to do that you just have to go to the collection, right mouse button and say instance to scene. And here's the instance. And what you have to know is that an instance isn't listed as an extra object. So yeah, it's just a collection, and if you change a vertex on the main object, it also affects on the instance. We have two cubes here. The first one is the real mesh and the second one is the instance. And if we want to convert the instance to a real mesh now, we just have to press Ctrl A and then say make instances real, and then it's also shown in the outliner. The fastest way to rename objects, collections or whatever is just by pressing F2 and type whatever you want. If you have large scenes with many objects, it can be very painful to find the object in the outliner. So to make it simpler, you can just select it in the viewport and press M. And then you can select your collection, or you can even make a new collection. The easiest and fastest way to clean up your file and make your file size a bit smaller is by just going to File, Clean Up, and click on Unused Data Blocks or Recursive Unused Data Blocks. This will delete all unused materials or particle systems, so it only affects on things that are not used anymore. If you want to change more than one value, you can just click on the first field, hold the mouse button and go down. And yeah, now you can type whatever you want. Blender's clipping distance is pretty low by default, so if you have a large object and move away, it just disappears. And what you can do here is just go to File and then type a higher number on the end. And yeah, here it is. But be aware, for the camera you have to type an extra value under Object Data Properties, and here on the end you have to type the same value as for the viewport. For example, we have 4 cubes and we want to make them further away from each other. An easy way to do that is by just selecting them and going to Effect Only under the tools. We click on Locations and then we can, with the scale function, influence the distance. Instead of changing the values here to 0, you can just press Shift and Z and now it's resetted. If you want to apply the material or modifiers from this cube to the other cubes, you only have to select them all and then press Ctrl L and say Link Materials, and Ctrl L again and copy modifiers. And now the material and modifiers are applied. If you have large collections with many objects and parented objects and so on, it's sometimes not so easy to select them all. And the best way to do it is by just pressing on the collection with the right mouse button and say select objects. Or you could delete all objects by pressing on delete hierarchy. And because the problem is, if you just click on the collection and delete it, the objects will remain. If you open a blend file and don't want to take over the interface, you can directly open the file over Blender and then press N and deactivate Load UI, and then it will be loaded with your own UI. If you don't want to have an extra textures folder and want to use the file on another PC, you have the ability to pack all textures directly into the file. And you can do that under File, External Data and Pack Resources. You have 2 ways to apply a modifier. The first way is by just selecting it, then go to the modifier and click on the arrow, and there you can say apply. But if you want to apply all modifiers on many objects, then there's another way. You could just select all, then go to Object, Convert and Convert to Mesh. And now all modifiers from all selected objects are applied. There's a very easy way to make hanging cables in Blender between 2 objects. For that, you first have to go to the Preferences and make sure that you have checked the extra objects for the curves. And then select both. Go to Add, Curve and Knots, and then select Catenary. And now you can control with the steps the amount of vertices. And with A, you can control how much the cable hangs. You can assign shortcuts you use very often to your quick favorites menu. So for example, we take the subdivide shortcut, then right click on it and say add to quick favorites. And now if we press Q, we can select it. The favorites are specific to object and edit mode, so each will have its own shortcut list.